Almost every kid on the planet recognizes this character before they can even read. Right now, somewhere, a kid is running through a living room, wearing an invisible mask, shooting webs from their wrist. But when this character was invented, his own publisher called him one of the worst ideas he'd ever heard. Today, 64 years later, that same character just broke the biggest opening weekend American theaters have ever seen. And the real reason for that has surprisingly little to do with the hero. It has to do with you. The story begins in 1962, in New York, at a comic book publisher that's about to cancel one of its series. To understand how crazy this idea sounded back then, you have to know what heroes looked like at the time. Heroes were gods, billionaires, soldiers with broad chests, untouchable grown-ups, looking down at the world from above. These were characters you admired from a very safe distance. The logic behind it was simple. Kids want to look up to heroes, not meet themselves inside the comic, or so everyone thought. And right in the middle of this world, two men are working on something completely different. Writer Stan Lee and artist Steve Ditko. Two very different men creating something together that will grow bigger than both of them. Their idea, a superhero who's still in high school. And if you believe the legend, the boss's reaction was brutal. First, teenagers aren't heroes. Teenagers are sidekicks, the assistants of the real heroes. The kid was never the main event. They hand the big guys their tools and call for help at just the right moment. Second, spiders. People are disgusted by spiders. Nobody buys a comic with a spider on the cover. And third, the biggest objection of all, a hero with money problems, homework, and self-doubt. A hero who gets lectured by his aunt and has to sew his own costume. Heroes don't have problems. Heroes solve problems. 3 objections. 3 experienced professional opinions. And all 3 sounded completely reasonable. On paper, the boss was right. The idea seemed dead. But then something strange happened. Something nobody in that office saw coming. One of the publisher's series was getting cancelled anyway. Amazing Fantasy. Final issue. August 1962. And for a comic that's already dying, there's one simple rule. Nothing left to lose. If it flops, nobody will notice. The comic is dead anyway. So the publisher's supposedly worst idea got to appear right there, in the very last issue of a dying series. As a parting gift, nobody expected anything. Nobody was even paying attention. Months later, the sales numbers came in, and the legend says the office went very quiet. The comic everyone had written off became one of the best-selling issues of the year. And then came the letters. Kids from all over the country wrote to the publisher. They wanted more of this strange boy, not more of the gods, not more of the billionaires, more of the kid with the problems. The publisher had heard 1,000 opinions from adults. Now, for the first time, it was hearing from the kids themselves. Within a very short time, the teenager nobody wanted got his own series. The boy got a name that every person on this planet knows today. And the publisher that didn't want him later built half an empire on his shoulders. Within a few years, the strange boy was everywhere. The comics became cartoons, the cartoons became movies, and the movies became records. Today, that exact issue from back then is one of the most valuable comic books ever printed. The worst idea in the building turned out to be the best one. But why? What had millions of kids seen in this character that 3 grown publishing professionals had missed? The honest answer, exactly the 3 things. The boss called weaknesses, the kid, the everyday problems, and the mask. Because these 3 so-called weaknesses press 3 very deep buttons in our brains. Buttons that, back in 1962, nobody even knew existed. 3 buttons, and we're about to press all 3. Why this keeps working, generation after generation, for 64 years, researchers only figured out decades later, in an experiment with 4-year-olds. Picture a kid, 4 years old, facing the most boring task in the world. Press the same key, over and over. And right next to them sits a tablet, full of games. Researchers wanted to know, how long does a kid hold out before giving up? Most of them, not long, no surprise there. But one group lasted far longer than everyone else. And the difference was a costume. These kids got to pretend they were Batman. They even got a cape. And instead of asking themselves, am I working hard? They asked, is Batman working hard? The result was so striking that the study now has a nickname, the Batman effect. When you play the hero, you step slightly outside yourself, and suddenly you can do more than you thought you could. More patience, more courage, more grit. A kid in a hero costume isn't hiding. That kid is training. Psychologists call this self-distancing. One tiny step out of your own head, and suddenly the hard thing gets easier. And the research went even further. Other scientists showed that clothing alone changes how we think. People wearing a white coat they believe is a doctor's coat work more carefully than people who think it's a painter's coat. Same coat, different story in your head, different performance. What we put on changes who we are in that moment. And now comes the part that separates Spider-Man from every other hero. A comics theorist named Scott McCloud described a famous principle. The simpler a drawn face is, the more we see ourselves in it. A photorealistic portrait is somebody else, but a simple smiley face, that's you. That's why simple characters work all around the world. Sounds weirdly familiar around here, by the way. No comment. And Spider-Man takes this principle to the extreme. He's the only major hero whose face you never see. No hair, no skin color, no age, head to toe, a blank surface. Literally anyone could be under that mask. Any kid, in any country on Earth. And that's not an accident, and it's not a flaw. It's his actual superpower. Then there's something researchers call wishful identification. We attach to characters who are just like us, plus a little bit more. A billionaire with a secret cave? Impressive, but far away. A kid who runs late, gets in trouble, is always short on cash, and still goes out every night to help people. That feels within reach. He's the only hero with homework. That explains why kids love him, but it doesn't explain the other mystery. Why do grown adults sit in a movie theater and get goosebumps the moment that music starts? The answer starts with a word science underestimated for a long time: nostalgia. Researchers like Konstantin Sedikides have shown that nostalgia isn't cheesy. It's social glue. It connects us to our younger selves and to the people we share those memories with. And nostalgia gets passed down, like an heirloom, handed down carefully from one childhood to the next. By now, there have been 3 whole movie generations of this character. If you watched the cartoon as a kid, you stood in line at the movie theater as a teenager, and today you're back in that theater, this time with your own kids. A parent watching this movie with their child isn't just showing them a hero. They're showing them a piece of their own childhood. And without saying it out loud, they're telling them, this mattered to me. Now it belongs to you. That's why that record-breaking opening weekend wasn't just kids in the seats. It was families, 3 generations, 1 hero. And then there's that one line. You know it. With great power comes great responsibility. As a kid, you hear an adventure in it. As an adult, you hear your life in it. Because behind the colorful surface, this character is about things that are not kid topics: loss, guilt, and the question of how you keep going when something can't be undone. A grief story hidden inside a kid's costume, maybe the smartest hiding place in pop culture. Which brings us to the answer, the promise from last time. The reason the whole world loves this character isn't inside the hero, it's inside you. The mask is blank on purpose, so that you fit inside it. Kids use this character to practice who they want to become, braver, more patient, stronger, and adults use him to remember who they wanted to become, and sometimes to try again. So you don't just love a superhero, you love the version of yourself he shows you. And if you've ever felt a little silly for getting goosebumps at a superhero movie, as a grown adult, you're not a fan who never grew up. You're using a 64-year-old practice space for the best version of yourself. Which hero had you running through the living room as a kid? Drop it in the comments, and let's take a trip down memory lane together. And do you know someone who grew up with Spider-Man? Send this video their way. Stuff like this is more fun when it's shared. And if you want more of this, feel free to subscribe. In the next video, why drinking water matters so much for your body, and what would happen to you without it. And that kid running through the living room in an invisible mask right now, they're not practicing being a hero. They're practicing being themselves. I'm Poppy. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Stick around. There's a lot more coming.